day to you all, my dear students, my BE Ed students, my BTBT Ed students, my architectural drafting students, and of course, my community development students.
Today we are on lesson 4 of our subject, Understanding the Self, which is the psychological
So
perspective.
sit back, relax, and listen carefully so that you will be able to participate in our discussion as we go along. Get ready to chat in the live chat your inputs or questions about the topic, and of course, comment below present for your attendance this week.
In psychology, the notion of self refers to a person's experience as single, unitary, autonomous being that is separate from others, experienced with continuity through time and place.
Who is Freud?
Sigmund Freud was an Austrian neurologist and a founder of psychoanalysis.
A clinical method for treating psychopathology through the dialogue between the patient and the analyst.
Freud believes that events in our childhood have a great influence on our adult lives, shaping our personality.
The concept of this theory is that inner drives or motivation, unconscious motives or unknown desires, and unresolved issues control our development.
Magsiling ka gani psychoanalytic, tatlo gini sila. Nga nagakompose kuno sang ato nga personality. Si Id, may pagka-impulsive ni siya. Doon sige, dabala kung ano gusto mo makuha dayon without even thinking of the result or consequences of your actions as long as nasatisfy mo lang ya kung ano ang imo nga gusto. For example, gusto mo na gid magwa kay bored ka na sa inyo balay because of this quarantine or this pandemic. And your id tells you magwa bala lagaw. But the super ego will tell you, sige, gwa da bala kay magkasakit kagid karon, so better na lang nga stay home. So, syempre, wala na satisfy si id. Kaya hindi ka pagpagbaon sa imo nga super ego. So, what does the ego do para ma-balance out ang duwa? Sige, ano tingin niyo ang naming solusyon? Of course, para masatisfy mo si id na gusto mo magwa, you need to practice social distancing and wearing of face shield and face mask. Dala ka naman sang alcohol or sanitizer para makalikaw ikaw sa sakit. Pero syempre, hindi man adlaw-adlaw ang magwa kagid. Another example of id. Gusto mo magkaon sweets, pero diabetic ka. And you really want to eat Jayco or chocolate. Hambal ni id kaon. Gusto ko gid magkaon chocolate. I want. Amo ginang hambal ni id. So ano naman yung hambal ni super ego? Syempre, based on morality or based on what is right, hambal si super ego nga hindi ka magkaon kay magtaas ang imong sugar and you will end up sa hospital or even dead. Dibala? So, what will ego say sa duwa para ma-balance out at masatisfy man gihapon ang gusto ni id nga magkaon? Of course, pwede man nga kung magkaon ka chocolate, ang one block lang na bala nga piece ng chocolate para lang masatisfy si id at the same time, hindi man matam-an ng imo nga sugar. So, intindihan na ang relationship ni id, ego, and super ego? Okay, testingan tabi. Who can give examples sa chat box sang isa ka id? Okay, can you give me examples sang id? The chat box. Okay, pay attention sa chat box. Ang lawagon ko nga id nga example, I want you to give a super ego. Sa chat ko nga id. Naging kuha ko nga example sa classmate niyo. I want you to give an example of a super ego na related sa id nga ginhatag sa classmate niyo. Okay, next. Ego naman. Ano ang ego? Between sa id, yung ginambal sa classmate nyo, and the super ego. Ano naman ang ego? Ano ang balance sa ego? Ano ang sa ego? So I hope clear na kita dira sa psychoanalytic theory ni Sigmund Freud about the id, ego, and superego. Next, may ara pa isa ka theory or stages of development na propose si Sigmund Freud, and this is called the psychosexual stages of development. And it is very easy to remember. May ara kita 5 stages sa psychosexual. So tandaan nyo lang, ang apelyido ni Sigmund Freud, ang Freud has 5 letters. So iyan isa ang psychosexual stages of development, which also has 5 stages. So mula na pero hindi ka ma-confuse, remember, Freud has 5 letters, and iyan ni theory ang psychosexual stages, which also has 5 stages of development. Kag ano ini ng mga stage?
Freud proposed that personality development in childhood takes place during 5 sexual stages, which are the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages. Sigmund Freud was an Australian neurologist who is perhaps most known as the founder of psychoanalysis.
Oral stage. In Freud's theory, the oral stage begins at birth and typically lasts until children are 1 year old. The oral stage characterized by the pleasure center and libido being centered around the mouth.
At this point in development, a child's primary source of pleasure is through the mouth via sucking, eating, and tasting. The problem with this stage, it can result in what Freud referred to as an oral fixation.
The libido is centered in a baby's mouth. During the oral stage, the baby gets much satisfaction from putting all sorts of things in its mouth that's also satisfy the libido.
And this is called the oral stage. Magsiling ka oral, gratification is achieved through the mouth. So ano balay na? How do they find gratification through the mouth? Of course, may ara nga bottle feeding or breastfeeding or gakaon. And of course, may raman kita ginatawag nga thumb sucking. Mga mahilig bala mag-sup-sup sang ilang tudlo ang mga baby because they find it pleasurable. And of course, mga bubbles nila. So that is the oral stage. Next, we have
The anal stage is the second stage in Sigmund Freud's theory of psychosexual development, taking place approximately between the ages 18 months and 3 years. According to Freud, the anus is the primary erogenous zone and pleasure derived from controlling bladder and bowel movement.
Age range from 1 to 3 years. Freud suggested that an anal exclusive personality could develop in which the individual has a messy, wasteful, or destructive personality.
During the anal stage, psychosexual development, the libido becomes focused on the anus, and the child derives great pleasure from defecating. The child is now fully aware that they are a person in their own right and that their wishes can bring them into conflict with the demands of the outside world. Freud believes that these type of conflicts tends to become ahead in potty training, in which adults impose restrictions on when and where the child can defecate. The nature of this first conflict with authority can determine the child's future relationship with all forms of authority.
The anal stage is in between the age of 1 to 3 years old. During this stage, Freud believed that the primary focus of the libido was on controlling bladder and bowel movements. Developing this control leads to a sense of accomplishment and independence.
During the anal stage, Freud believed that the primary focus of the libido was on controlling bladder and bowel movements. The major conflict at this stage is toilet training. The child has to learn to control their bodily needs.
Stage 2 is called the anal stage. Anal, nga adara. Because ang bata gatuon paano mamuhin. They find gratification through defecating or pagpamuson.
The phallic stage is the third stage of psychosexual development. Phallic stage wherein the children begin to discover the differences of males and females at the age of 3 to 6 years.
Phallic stage, age range, 3 to 6 years old, erogenous zone, genitals. During the phallic stage, the primary focus of the libido is on the genitals. At this age, children also begin to discover the difference between males and females.
The phallic stage wherein it ranged from 3 to 6 years old. According to Freud, at this age, children began to discover the differences between males and females.
Wherein the infant libido desire center upon their genitalia as the erogenous zone. The child becomes aware of anatomical sex differences which switch of emotion and conflict between erotic attraction, resentment, rivalry, jealousy as the fear which Freud called be Oedipus conflict in boys and Electra conflict in girls. This is resolved through the processes and identification which involve the child adopting characteristic of the same-sex parent.
Screening the ages of 3 to 6 years is primarily focused on identifying with the same-sex parent, wherein the infant's libido or desire centers upon their genitalia as the erogenous zone.
The next stage is the phallic stage, and phallic is related to penis. So, magsiling ka na gani phallic, automatically you will think of genitals, and this is from children age 3 to 7 years old. And they are curious about their genitals and becomes attached to the parent of the opposite sex. Doon nag-develop ang ginatawag nila nga Oedipus complex kung sa boy and Electra complex naman kung sa girl. And what are these complexes? Nga mo ng term. Well, if you read the Greek mythology, si Oedipus was the one who killed his father to marry his mother. And si Electra naman niya killed her mother in order to seek revenge sa pagkamatay naman sa ilang father. So, hindi na kamo mag-wonder kung sino daw may mga hinablos or manghod or even bata nga kung amo nga edad, 3 to 7 years old, may tendency nga ang babae maging papa's girl or kung lalaki maging mama's boy because of these complexes. So, it's only normal. Pero kung matamaan na gani, hindi rin na bala gatawag nga kung hindi na bala sa amo nga edad, do kalaw ay natawag ka nga mama's boy or papa's girl, kaya dapat ma-overcome mo na ni ang amo mo nga stage.
Means hidden. Latent is a fourth stage of psychosexual development, spanning a period of 6 years to puberty. During this stage, the libido is dominant and no further psychosexual development takes place. It is still present, but it is sublimated into other areas such as intellectual pursuit and social interaction. It is important in the development of social and communication skills and self-confidence.
Age range 6 to puberty. Erogenous zone. Sexual feelings are inactive. During this stage, the suprego continues to develop, while the ID's energies are suppressed. Children develop social skill, values, and relationship with peers and adults outside of the family. Boys usually relate more with boys and girls with girls during this stage.
Spanning the period of 6 years to puberty. During this stage, the libido is dormant and no further psychosexual development takes place. Latent means hidden. Freud thought that most sexual impulses are repressed during the latent stage, and sexual energy can be sublimated towards schoolwork, hobbies, and friendships.
Latency stage. 6 years to puberty, the latency stage is the fourth stage of psychosexual development, spanning the period of 6 years to puberty. During this stage, the libido is dormant and no further psychosexual development takes place.
The next stage is the latency stage. From age 7 to 12 years old, and the child becomes preoccupied with developing his skills and other activities over sexual motivations. Nga again, hambal over sexual motivations because this is the psychosexual stages of development. And sa amo nga edad sa bata, of course, the start na siya eskwela. And he or she is learning new things like mga curricular activities sa school or even sa mga academics. So, preoccupied na siya sa pagtuon. So, parang latent or parang dormant lang ang iyang sexual motivations.
The genital stage by Sigmund Freud, which is the final stage of human psychosexual development. And the genital stage begins at puberty and lasts all the remaining human lifespan. In this stage, an individual develops a strong sexual interest in people outside of the family. They are sexually matured. Adult personality developments are possessed to have fully resolved their Oedipus complex, to exhibit a mature sexuality that involves true intimacy and expresses equal concern for their own and their partner's satisfaction.
The genital stage is the last stage of Freud's psychosexual theory of personality development, and it begins in puberty. It is a time of adolescent sexual experimentation and successful resolution of which is setting down in a loving one-on-one relationship with another person in our 20s.
The genital stage is the last stage of Freud's psychosexual theory of personality development,
and begins in puberty. It is a time of adolescent sexual experimentation, the successful resolution of which is settling down in loving one-to-one relationship with another person in our 20s.
And the last stage is the genital stage. Hindi ka mo ma-confuse sa genital and the phallic stage, okay? Last stage ang genital because it is from age 12 hasta na ni mag-adult. And after puberty, the deepest feelings of pleasure presumably come from heterosexual relations or opposite sex. So I'm sure maybe you have some questions, so I will give time at the end of this for you to ask or even to give your input about the 5 stages of development ni Sigmund Freud. So we have the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. So we will now give time for your questions or any matters na gusto nyo i-discuss with regards to Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytical and also psychosexual stages of development.
Who is Erikson?
Erikson, also known as Erik Hamburger or Erik Erikson. He is a German-American who was born on June 15, 1902.
Known for his theory psychosocial development on human beings, which has 8 stages.
He suggested that healthy success in each stages would lead to a happy life.
Sa kay Erik Erikson naman, kung nga nabuo ining psychosocial stages of self-development is because for him, a crisis is not a threat of catastrophe, but a turning point, a crucial period of increased vulnerability and heightened potential. So, kung may matabo ba lang nga crisis sa imong kabuhi, it will either make you or break you. So, daan na nga ang iyan ng mga stages, may ara nga versus. Example, if you are an orphan, will you grow up to be an independent individual or more of a low self-esteem or wala ka kabalo kung kay sino ka masalig?
What is psychological development? The psychological development is the development of human beings' cognitive, emotional, intellectual, and social capabilities and functioning over the course of a normal lifespan.
Para matandaan nyo, si Erik Erikson, may mas laba siya yung apelido. May mas damo man siya yung stages of development sa yung psychosocial stages. And we have 8. And the first one is
Stage 1.
Trust versus mistrust is the first stage of Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. It begins at birth until 1 month of age. In this stage, infants seek for stability and consistency of care from caregivers to develop their trust and good help in establishing relationships.
As we proceed in our life, we gain trust or mistrust through how adult caregivers gives value and sufficient care for us.
Infants learn to trust that their caregivers will meet their basic needs. These needs are not consistently met. Mistrust, suspicion, and anxiety may develop.
Tapos lang intindihan, trust meaning may pagsalig and mistrust wala. So nga bala wala ka gasalig. Kagnaan naman gasaling ka. So this is for children from birth to 18 months or mga manog 2 years old. And they will develop a sense of trust kung ginatatak sila, either of their mother or of their yaya. And mistrust naman kung wala sila ginatatak mayo. Like for example, ginabilin ka lang sa yaya, so you will develop a mistrust sa imong own parents, and dito kaya matrust sa imong yaya. Klaro? So if successful in your stage or the infant has achieved trust, then he or she will develop a virtue of hope. Nga kung ano man ito galing nga crisis, ang sunod nga mag-aabot sa iya, ma-feel niya nga makakuha siya ng sense of support from other people. Pero kung nakadevelop ang infant sang mistrust, hindi siya makakuha sang hope, kundi fear. Dumabundayan na siya magsalig sa mga tao.
The second stage of Erik Erikson's psychosocial development is autonomy versus guilt and doubt. This period occurs between the ages 18 months to 2 to 3 years old. Children at this age, according to Erikson's, are focused on acquiring a stronger feeling of self-control.
Autonomy versus shame and doubt is the second stage of Erik Erikson's stage of psychosocial development. This stage occurs between the ages of 18 months to approximately 3 years. According to Erikson, children at this stage are focused on developing a sense of personal control over physical skills and a sense of independence.
And it takes place during early childhood and is focused on children developing a greater sense of personal control. And I have example here.
In an early childhood, we experience and discover ourselves. Children at this stage begins to explore the world. The child develops a sense of personal control over physical skills. Parents now play their major roles and they need to allow their child to make choices of their own for them to become more independent while protecting them from shame and doubt in their abilities.
This stage occurs between the ages of 18 months to around age 2 or 3 ages. According to Erikson, children at this age are focused on developing a greater sense of self-control.
Next stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt. Magsiling ka galing autonomy, like there is self-government, to kabalo-kabala kung paano mo i-control ang iyong self about doing stuff sa edad niya, 18 months to 3 years old. Kalantaw ka muna sang advertise nga ni Marian nga nagsisimula na maging independent. Oops, support lang.
Nagsisimula ng maging independent? Support lang.
Dapat man, as parents, ina-encourage ang bata to do things on their own para makadevelop sila sa sense of autonomy. Pero kung ano-ano to gani, dugay-dugay kigan, like kung gahampang, tapos tanan-tanan na lang tuy-tuyan, or kigan, kaya balang hindi kabalo, then they will develop a sense of shame and doubt, or pagduwa-duwa sa ilang kaugalingon kung ano ginman bala ang ilang kapasidad. So, if the child successfully develops a sense of autonomy over his environment, makakuha man siya sa virtue nga will. They will have a sense of independence and more confident and secure sa ilang own abilidad to survive diri sa kalibutan. Pero kung wala gani and they develop shame or doubt, they will have lack self-esteem.
Initiative versus guilt is the third stage of Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. During the initiative versus guilt stage, children assert themselves more frequently through directing play and other social interaction.
This stage occurs during between age 3 and 5, wherein during this stage, children begin to assert their power and control over the world through directing play and other social interaction.
At this point, children begin to assert their power and control over the world through directing play and other social interactions. Those who fail to acquire these skills are left with a sense of guilt, self-doubt, and lack of initiative.
During the initiative versus guilt stage, children assert themselves more frequently through directing play and other social interactions.
Sa preschool or nagaedad ang bata sang 3 to 5 years old. Dali nagasugod na maobserbahan nyo ang bata pala pamangkot gid siya. And of course, ga-socialize man siya sa iban ng mga bata. And kung as a parent or as a guardian, kung pala pamangkot ang bata, how will you respond sa iyang mga pamangkot? Siyempre curious siya sa world.
All kids can't have coffee. Because coffee is for big people. Because little kids can't drink it. It makes you too hyper.
Why make me too hyper? Give me a little bit.
No.
So if you help the child discover ang answer sa iyang mga questions, like buligan mo siya or sabton mo siya sa instructo, then he or she will develop initiative. Pero kung natak-an ka, sagay siya pamangkot, kagambalan mo siya nga, kagawad or kasabad, then the child will not know kung ano ang sala niya nga ginubra. And then it will develop sa iya a sense of guilt nga, wala man siya kabalo, may nasala, gali ang pag-amot to, pero nangaking ka. So kung successful naman, yung makakuha ang bata sa initiative sa among edad, ang virtue nga ma-develop sa iya is purpose. So, balaan niya kung ano ang purpose niya sa iyang life.
Industry versus inferiority. Erikson's fourth psychosocial crisis involving industry versus inferiority occurs during childhood between the ages of 5 and 12. If the child cannot develop the specific skill they feel society is demanding, then they may develop a sense of inferiority.
Industry versus inferiority. Erikson's fourth psychosocial crisis involves industry versus inferiority, occurs during the childhood between the ages of 5 to 12. Children are the stage where they will be learning to read and write, to do sums, to do things on their own. Teachers began to take an important role in the child's life as they teach the children specific skills.
The four states take place during the early school years from approximately ages 5 to 11. Through social interaction, children begin to develop a sense of pride in their accomplishment and ability. Children needs to cope with new social and academic demands. Success leads to a sense of competence, while failure results feelings of inferiority.
Inferiority occurs during childhood between the age 5 and 12. The children begin to feel the serious component and are confident in their ability to achieve goals. If there is initiative, it is not encouraged. If they are restricted by the parents or teacher, then the child begins to feel inferior.
Occurring from 6 to 11 years, during which the child learns to be productive and to accept evaluation of his or her efforts, or becomes discouraged and feels inferior or incompetent.
This is where teachers begin to take an important role sa kabuhi ng bata because kung na-overcome niya na or tapos na siya sa initiative versus guilt niya stage, and kung may initiative ang bata and the teacher will encourage that child to show his potential, magka-develop ng sense of competence ang bata and maging industrious about sa iyang ability. Kaya maging confident siya to use that ability to achieve the purpose or ang iyang goal. Like, kung namian siya mag-gitara or namian siya maghampang basketball, so dapat ginasuportahan gid sila, either sang ilang coach, sang ilang teacher, and of course, sang parents. Pero kung ginapunggan-punggan sang parents for the child to explore his abilities, then makadevelop ina sang inferiority. Nga do, kung wala siya sa amo ng abilidad, syempre, kag makita yung mga classmates siya nga sagad niya mag-drawing, sagad niya mag-basket, sagad niya magtukar sang instrument, then feel niya, do wala siya may nabalaan, nga duwa-duwa siya sa iya nga own, nga kakayahan. Kaya wala siya una pa lang, ginsuportahan. Pero hindi man sa tanan nga permi na lang i-encourage ang bata. Dapat matun-an niya man ang sense of modesty. Nga hindi man pala magdako ulo ya kung sagay mo siya ka daya or encourage about sa iyang abilidad. So dapat balanse lang. And if the child will successfully have industry, ang virtue nga makuha dira is competent.
Identity versus confusion is the fifth stage of ego in psychologist Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. This stage occurs during adolescence between the ages of approximately 12 and 18. During this stage, adolescents explore their independence and develop a sense of self. They usually ask, "Who am I?" So, who are you? I am Giselle Pison for BIT 881A.
The fifth stage of Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development is identity versus role confusion, and it occurs during adolescence from about 12 to 18 years. During this stage, adolescents search for a sense of self and personal identity through an intense exploration of personal values, beliefs, and goals.
Identity versus confusion. Identity versus confusion is the fifth stage of ego in psychologist Erik Erikson's theory and psychosocial development. This stage occurs during adolescence between the ages of approximately 12 and 18. During this stage, adolescents explore independence and develop a sense of self.
This stage is characterized by the adolescent's question of, "Who am I?" during which time they are conflicted with dozens of values and ideas of who they should be and what they should think. Peers provide security and role models.
Very simple. Magambal identity, balaan mo kung diin ka na belong. Balaan mo ang imo nga self or identity. And this is from 12 to 18 years of age. So kung 12 years old ka, ano ka na? You're either grade 7 or grade 8. Wala ka pa nag-college, wala ka pa nag-senior high, so wala ka pa ka-choose kung ano nga path ang gusto mo sa imo nga life. So sa amo ni nga stage, diri niyang pinaka-crucial nga process ang imo nga pagdako because this will determine two identities nga na-involve, and that is your sexual identity and occupational identity. So before ka magpili sa imo nga strand sa senior high or sa imo nga course sa college, dapat na-establish mo lang imong sense of identity kay balaan mo na kung anong occupation mo nga dangtan sa ulihi. And what about sa sexual? Dala naman da ang gender roles kay may ara gani diri nga role confusion. And you know, sometimes, kaping pabikon if you are born sa family nga ikaw lang laki, yun po sila bayi, then do wala ka kabalo kung anong imong nga role, kay do wala ka sang either boy or male figure. Sa iban man yung families nga wala sang papa, amo na akong kisa, ka-confuse ang bata kung ano gin man ang iya nga sex role. And there are times nga, kung ginasundo, kay hindi kaya belong sa amo na nga grupo, so do ka-confuse ka naman kung kay sino kaya mag-in, kay hindi ka mabaton sang amo na nga society. Anyway, I'll give you an example.
Birthday high! Nasa tabi sa unang araw ng eskwela. Taas kamay, confidence. Let's go na birthday high! Umaabot sa talino, tumingin high. Tumayaman si Papa, sa high. Pagpahilig ka sa sports, every high. Tungkol sa testing, tulungan mo high. Pag-solid sa pain, the night sky high. Itaas ang
If you are able to successfully gain your identity, ang virtue nga ma-develop dira is fidelity.
Intimacy versus isolation is the sixth stage of Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. This stage takes place during young adulthood between the ages of approximately 18 to 40 years. During this stage, the major conflicts center on forming intimate, loving relationship with other people.
Intimacy versus isolation is the sixth stage of Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. This stage takes place during young adulthood between the ages of approximately 19 to 40 years old.
Young adults need to form intimate, loving relationship with other people. Success leads to strong relationship, while failure results in loneliness and isolation. This stage covers the period of early adulthood when people are exploring personal relationships.
This stage takes place during young adulthood between the ages of 19 and 40. The major conflict at this stage centers on forming intimate, loving relationships with other people.
Ma-explore naman kamo sa intimacy nga part versus isolation. Nga intimacy, nga isolation because sa amo nyo nga edad, ga-develop na kamo sang intimate relationship with other people. And usually, ginapananaw nyo nga long-term ini, nga makakommit kamo with someone other than your. Pero kung ga-avoid kayo sa intimacy, hindi kayo kasaho to have an intimate relationship with others, luwas sa imong pamilya, kung tukulbaan kayo commitment, pero sa akon, hindi pa na. Pero kung amo na, it can lead to isolation and loneliness, and sometimes depression. So, kung manuglaon ka, sige, hindi ko na amo pero what I'm saying is, importante gid that you will have someone to grow old with you because no man is an island. You will be happy kung may ga-care sa imo, kung may ga-palangga sa imo, may ga-atipan sa imo. And success in this stage will lead to a virtue of love. So kung may love na, kung may partner ka na, we will now go to the next stage.
Generativity versus stagnation is the seventh stage of Erik Erikson's psychosocial stage of development, which thought to occur during middle adulthood. The main focus of this stage is becoming a productive member of society.
Age range 45 to 64 of age. When we reach our 40s, we became comfortable, use our leisure time creatively, and then we begin contributing to society. Our concern is generativity. If we think that we're able to lead the next generation into this world, we are happy. If we did not resolve some conflict earlier, we can become pessimistic and experience stagnation.
This stage takes place during middle adulthood, 40 to 65 years. Psychologically, generativity refers to making your mark on the world through creating or nurturing things that will outlast an individual. During middle age, individuals experience a need to create nurture that will outlast them, often having mentees or creating positive changes that will benefit other people.
The adults needs to create or nurture things that will outlast them, often by having children or creating a positive change that benefits other people.
This is a stage where adulthood starts to create or nurture things that will outlast them. It happens during the middle adulthood, approximately 40 to 65 years old. An example of this is parenting or contributing positive changes that benefit of people.
Word nga generativity, ga-generate, may bata ka mo. So, dapat kung generativity, you raise your children well, you be productive sa imong nga obra, and maging involved ka man sa community activities and organizations. And if you are successful in this, then you will develop a virtue of care. Meanwhile naman niya, kung wala ka gid may ginabulig sa imong sosyedad or sa imong nga palibot, you will feel or become stagnant.
Integrity versus despair.
Integrity versus despair is the 8th psychosocial development of Erik Erikson. At this stage, the key conflict centers on questioning whether or not the individual has led a meaningful, satisfying life.
Ego, integrity versus despair is the 8th and final stage of Erik Erikson's stage theory of psychosocial development. This stage begins at approximately the age of 65 and ends at death. It is during this time that we contemplate our accomplishment and can develop integrity if we see ourselves as leading successful life.
This stage begins at approximately age 65 and ends at death. It is during this time that we contemplate our accomplishments and can develop integrity if we see ourselves as leading a successful life.
The last stage, stage 8, integrity versus despair. The final psychosocial stage occurs during old age and is focused on reflecting back on life. At this point in development, people look back on the events of their lives and determine if they are happy with the life they live or if they regret the things they did or didn't do.
It begins at approximately age 65 and ends at death. During this stage, people reflect back on the life they have lived and come away with either a sense of fulfillment from a life well lived or a sense of regret and despair over life.
It is a final stage occurs during the old age and it focuses on reflecting back on life. According to Erikson's theory, success in this stage leads to feelings of wisdom, while failure results in regret, bitterness, and despair.
Naagin tawag na integrity kag despair because we are now looking back on the life that we have lived. Kung ano ang mga na-accomplish ta, kung diin na kita subong, can we say that we are successful sa amuto na nga edad? And if we think that we have lived our life to the fullest, daka ka develop ang sense of integrity. And ang virtue nga makuha mo kung may integrity ka is the virtue of wisdom. Ang mga gani sa mga kalululuhan, tabala kung feel ta nami sila mga grandparents sa aton, damo lang sila may gina-partake or may ginabahagi sa aton ng mga wisdom about sa life nila when they were still young or growing up. Di bala? And amo na gani kung unproductive naman kita if we feel guilty about our past, wala gid kita may na-accomplish, wala ta ginalabot ang aton nga goals, kag tigulang na kita, that is why nakadevelop ang despair.
Alright, so that was the psychological perspectives of the cell. So we will just have a quick review. So, sino ang nag-develop sa psychoanalytical and psychosexual theory? Can I have answers in the chat box? What about the psychosocial stages of development? Can you enumerate the psychosexual stages of development? Sige be. First 5. Dapat pasunod. What about the psychosocial stages of development? Siyempre, dapat pasunod man. Okay, I'll give you time. So, sa aton yung mga gindiscuss subong, anong gid ang pinaka nagtatak sa inyo or anong mga natun-an nyo or nabinag-binag nyo sa aton yung mga topic subong regarding sa development sang aton yung kaugalingon. Alright, I'll give you time to share and I will record your answers. Kung may mga pamangkot, sige pwede ka mo ka-insert di ka pamangkot and I will try my best to answer your questions. Kag kung maubusan kita time sa amutan nga session, of course, we still have our Facebook group to discuss more of that.
I hope you learned something and I hope na may nagdugang sa inyo nga kaalaman. If you have more questions, we will continue our discussion for this week sa aton nga Facebook group. Have a great week! God bless!
ありがとうございます。